Chapter 4 Angry Man. One pilgrim, when the door was shut behind him, felt enraged. His blood in a tumult rushed to his brain, breaking blood vessels in the whites of his eyes. He pounded on the door. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Let me back in! You can't do this to me! Who do you think you are? You fraud! You pipsqueak!" Angrier and angrier he grew. He banged on the door, then went down the steps, stomping on the ground, flailing his arms, looking for something to harm, to break, a rock to throw, flowers to trample, but his red eyes were too blind with rage to see a rock, a stick, a flower. So he roared louder, calling up every vile, vicious, profane, foul word he knew, and he had many at his command, for this sort of temper tantrum was not new with him. What was new was being alone. There was no one to cower fearfully before his wrath, no one to try to placate him, shudder, turn ashen-faced, wring hands, and infuriate him further. So his anger ran out, and he began to return to his senses. But an echo was coming back to him from the hills across the valley. His words were coming back at him, fraud, pipsqueak, etc. But the words came not one at a time, as is usually the case with echoes. No, when he fell silent, the entire vile, vicious, foul-mouthed, disgusting tirade came back to him word by word, and at the same time his shadow reenacted his insane dance, his berserk leaping, stomping, and flailing. For the first time he saw how he looked and heard how he sounded, and he was ashamed. He was a man of learning, an appreciator of the arts, a philanthropist, a leader of men, a distinguished person. He'd once been considered a sensitive person. Now he saw himself in all his brutishness. The only thing missing in the playback was his face transmogrified to gargoyle in its anger. The shadow could not give back that image, could only portray his body language, but from that he was able to imagine the rest. He was horrified, and he was cured. Exhausted from his seizure, he sat down on a rock to rest before his descent to the town. The rock was smooth and sun-warmed. It soothed his muscles that were still twitching spasmodically from the fit. Several round gray birds, which the holy man called boulder birds, arranged themselves in a ragged line and struck up a chorus of tweedles and trills as if for his benefit. He felt happy and grateful. The reason he had come to see the holy man was about his temper. Chapter 5 Drunkard. One of the pilgrims was a drunkard. When he arrived, having come 9 miles up from town, the line was a mile long. He hadn't understood the situation, and so he certainly hadn't brought enough liquor to last him until he got to see the holy man. He put down the bottle he had brought, which was half gone, and asked the woman ahead of him if she would save his place in line. He had forgotten something in the town. "No, we can't save places for people. It wouldn't be fair. No one would know how far back they were in the line if there were a lot of unknown safe places in front of them. When people arrived to fill them, we would start going backwards instead of forward." The drunk looked befuddled. "Do you get it?" she asked. He frowned, considered, and dimly grasped the concept, but it didn't keep him from asking other arrivals if they would save his place in line. He was a charming young man, but no matter how he cajoled and wheedled, no one agreed. The rules of the line were no saving, except for answering the calls of nature, for which purpose shovels were available, 100 yards away to the left or right. No bribing, and, of course, not a chance of butting in. He sipped at his bottle, trying to make it last. The woman in front said kindly, "At some point the line will break for the day, and people will set up their camps for the night. You could go down to the town and be back in time to take your place when the line forms in the morning." "You mean I won't get to see the holy man today?" She laughed. "Don't you see how long the line is?" He looked ahead. "Well, yes, it looks pretty long, but..." "It isn't like a movie theater where you suddenly all go in at 7 or 9 o'clock. He sees us one at a time during a part of the day. He has other things to do." He observed the line, which at this time of day was in the inching forward mode. "It looks like maybe I won't get to see him tomorrow either." The woman laughed again. "When the line breaks," he thought, "I will hurry back to town and bring enough liquor for 2 or, at the outside, 3 days. That will be heavy trucking. Why couldn't I be addicted to something lightweight, some powder or pill? It's a shame. Life is very hard. Also, we're talking 18 miles here. At 4 o'clock the line broke, and he turned and dashed down to the town, arriving at 6:15, making such good time that it would allow for his return before darkness, which was not until almost 10. He went to a bar, had a few drinks, and decided not to try to go back that night. He'd go up again in the morning. It would mean being farther back in line, but so what? He woke up in the morning, and besides the usual grinding headache, his quadriceps were killing him. He remembered his headlong rush down the mountain. He could hardly walk. He waited for the liquor store to open, bought 3 bottles, and started up the long mountain path at 9:30. It took him 6 hours. Because it was steep, because of his quads, because he drank on the way and did a great deal of stumbling and backsliding the last 2 miles. Now, he was a lot farther down the line. He could tell because the woman he talked to yesterday was about 100 yards away. The line broke a half hour after he arrived, and while everyone set up their camps for the night, he sat down and drank. The next day in line, there was a big space at either side of the drunk because he smelled so terrible. His charm had deserted him. He made mooing, growling, or chicken clucking sounds instead of putting words together. He was a sad case. Too bad for the people near him, but they figured he wouldn't last long. Indeed, in 2 days he was out of booze again, and it dawned upon him that he'd have to make another night run. He was sober enough to realize that if he was ever going to see the holy man, he'd have to go and return in one fell swoop. No lingering in the town tavern, no spending the night at the inn. He'd better load up on food, too. He'd been bumming bits of food, but it wasn't fair to the pilgrims who had to make their provisions last. Luck was with him that the line broke earlier that day. He marked his place with a soiled handkerchief, turned, and hightailed it down the mountain. He realized he would be hard-pressed to be back before dark, and he wasn't. However, the last mile was lit by a slender moon attending the preposterous inlay of stars, and, as there hadn't been time for him to drink, he was not in danger of wandering off the path or taking a serious fall. Arriving, he lay down on his new blanket, too tired to drink, and fell into a long, sweet sleep. 2 days later, he was out of liquor again. Because of buying food, clothes, and a blanket, he hadn't had room in his pack for more than 1 bottle, but he'd made it last 2 days and nights. He began to grasp that this visit to the holy man entailed a bit more time than he'd first realized. Still, now that he knew he was capable of the run to town and back, he felt no anxiety. What's more, he was beginning to enjoy his companions, even though none of them were fellow drinkers. So when he made his next run, he offered to bring back any small necessities for his friends. A month later, when the door of the hermitage was opened to him, the holy man saw a muscular man with a joyful light in his clear eyes and a smile as big as a song. "Oh, Holy One," he said, "I'm so happy." He fell to his knees and kissed the hem of the small man's wheat-colored robe. Now, said the holy man, "cut that out. Stand up and tell me about it." He told his tale from the beginning in a rush of words, much like his rush down the mountain, because he didn't want to take too much of the holy man's time. "And before I knew it, I was going to town every few days, getting things for people who needed them, and I wasn't buying booze at all. And I got so I could cover the distance faster and faster. You can't imagine what a quivering mass of jelly I was the first time down the mountain. It's incredible! Now I can go down in an hour and up in 2. It must be a record, don't you think?" The holy man smiled. It was almost as fast as he and his monks did it, or, to be honest, as fast as he did it up until a year or 2 ago. "This is truly a wonderful story." "That line is the best thing that ever happened to me in my life." "I'm delighted for you. What will you do now?" "Well, I like doing things for people. Do you think I could be of help somewhere else?" "Almost anywhere." By now they're at the back door. "Is there anything you want to ask me?" "I originally came to see you because I had so many questions, but now I've forgotten them all." "Goodbye then, and good journey." "Goodbye, and thank you with all my heart." "I didn't do anything," said the holy man. Chapter 6. Fearful Woman. "Yes?" "I've come to see the holy man." "Please follow me." "But I want to see the holy man." "You've already seen me. If you will look on everyone you meet as a holy person, you will be happy. Goodbye." So it went, day after day, rushing one person after another through the house, in, out, back and forth. There had been no one to talk with, let alone someone to invite into his community to take under his wing. Normally, by the end of the summer, he had gathered 2 or 3 souls to spend the winter with him, 2 or 3 who were on the path of enlightenment. "Hello, my name is Eleanor. I hope I'm not disturbing you." She was a lovely but high-strung woman in her early 30s. "Not at all. Please come in." "Are you the holy man?" "Yes, I am. My name is Joe." "How good of you to come to the door yourself. May I talk with you for just a few minutes?" "Sit down here with me." "Thank you so much. I'm just a poor, foolish woman who doesn't deserve a moment of your time. But you see, I'm so afraid. Maybe you can help me." She clasped her hands over her breast. "I'm afraid of death." Joe nodded understandingly. "Not the act of dying itself, but of being dead. When I think of it, I feel a complete panic. I feel such dread, such horror. It paralyzes me." Joe nodded. "It overshadows and dominates my life," she finished, bowing her head. Joe said, "Because life and death are interdependent, so has your fear of death become a fear of life, so that you are unable to live." "Yes, as I sit here before you, I am as well as I've ever been because of all the fresh air and exercise I had simply in getting here. Normally, I can't even leave my house." "What you are feeling is existential anxiety, and it is perfectly normal. But some people who are more sensitive than others, more creative perhaps, feel this anxiety more excruciatingly, the fear of non-being." Her eyes clung hopefully to his as he spoke, and her lips even moved along with his, so desperately eager was she for his help. "And why not?" Joe said. "It is quite unacceptable that one day we will simply come to an end of our existence. But there you are. We will. It is inescapable. It is our sorry lot." "But why can't I come to grips with it? I can't bear to suffer this ongoing terror." "Yes, you can. Let me suggest that, when you think about non-being, instead of letting your mind scramble away in terror like a rat into its hole, do this." He paused and breathed deeply. "Remain still and calm. Take deep breaths. Look at your inevitable death. Reflect upon it. Get used to it. Do this every day. Make it a practice to dwell upon your eventual non-being. Gradually, let it be absorbed by your courage. Yes, you have courage. We all do. But yours is currently hidden away in that same rat hole. To have our courage ready at hand, we have to draw upon it regularly. We have to give it something to do." Joe was already tired of talking and wished he was back dispensing his one sensible sentence. He was weary of the sound of his voice. He didn't believe in talking much, but nor did he believe in elliptical remarks that would only leave the pilgrim puzzled and more desperate. So when he did talk, he tried to be direct. At least she was listening. "This all sounds very difficult," she said sadly. "It is difficult." "I thought you would, well—" "Make it easy? Tell you that you were going to heaven, or readying yourself for another life, or going to join the great spirit of the universe? Maybe you are. None of us knows. We only know that we cease to exist here on earth. And yes, it will not be easy to build up your courage, but you will have a most wonderful reward right away. You will begin to enjoy your life, to use your life, your recognition and acceptance of death. Why not call it your new friendship with death, which has been established during your daily visits, will enable you to live fully." "If I had a faith—" "Yes, that can be very helpful. True faith is a blessing. However, if you throw yourself into a religion just so that your anxiety will be relieved, you will give up your freedom." "Freedom?" We want to free our minds to come into harmony with the universe so as to be able to see into the true nature of things." "Yes." "Which embracing dogma prevents, and your courage will be disappointed if it doesn't have its chance with you." Joe stood up. She followed suit, and he escorted her to the back door. "You have started along the path. You are already a kind person. Now be courageous and, in time, be wise." "I will try. I feel deeply inspired. Thank you with all my heart. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Joe watched the woman start down the precipitous path. She turned to wave, smiling a small, brave smile. "I'm not really the holy man," he thought to himself. "I'm the holy chatterbox." Chapter 7. Lovers. Joe opened the door to the lovers, who were holding hands as if inseparable. "Hello, holy man," they greeted him, because lovers, happy people, people who were inherently kind, seemed to have no trouble recognizing him for who he was. "We met in the line," they said of each other. "We fell in love. Isn't it wonderful? We're going to be married. Has such a thing happened here before?" Joe smiled, since it happened all the time. "Will you give us your blessing?" "Yes." They prepared to kneel before him, but he said, "No, don't do that, and don't bow your heads. Just look at me." They did, beaming. "I wish you happiness," he said. "Be kind to each other and to others. Work hard together. Keep learning about the world. When you are reading a magazine or newspaper, consider reading a novel or poetry. When reading a novel, consider reading a book on astronomy or bird behavior. Realize you have at least an extra hour every day, probably 4, in which to learn a language or calculus. Use your mind to the hilt. Life passes quickly and, toward the end, gathers speed like a freight train running downhill. The more you know, the more you enrich yourselves and others." "Thank you. We'll try. And could we ask one more enormous favor? We want to name our baby after you. Could you tell us your name?" "Joe." This plain name seemed a paltry glory to pass on to their child, but they would make the best of it. Each pair of lovers believed they were the only ones who had the good luck to meet and fall in love in the string of people, but the holy man couldn't count the number of new lovers who had come to his door, hands clasped together, men and women, 2 women or 2 men, young or old or mixed ages, different races or nationalities, some who couldn't speak each other's languages. It was a loving, passionate line. He figured the world was already well increased with little born or adopted Joes and Joes, offspring of the line. As he watched the 2 of them set off down the path, he thought how he always forgot, in his set speech to lovers, to tell them to put the kids to bed early so they could get up with their learning. Perhaps he should send out flyers with bits of forgotten advice. He could do an airdrop. I could also urge them to think what an inspiration they will be to their youngsters, who, when they start doing homework, will see their parents doing homework too. All Joe wanted for the world was more kindness, less ignorance. This, he told his monks, was an easily achievable goal.